The research for THMPD 2004/24/EC began in 1994. After 10 years of collecting information, the government passed the legislation in 2004. A 7-year transitionary period began where the businesses affected had time to comply. 7 years to prepare, 7 years to educate, and 7 years to sort out licence requirements. It's all about to come into full force. I've had a couple of manufacturers say to me, I really don't know why you're confused about this. It's quite clear what's happening. But you know what? Yeah, I am confused. I admit it. I'm confused. And the more I speak to other retailers, I'm hearing the same story. They're confused as well.
They give you information, but it's a lot of it is technical and blurred.
We haven't been given enough information by the suppliers or by the government. We've had nothing through the door to tell us what we can and can't sell.
I'm always very proactive about what I do, and I find it impossible to be proactive because I don't know what I'm up against, basically. So yeah, complete confusion.
I think that were it a safety issue, as soon as this legislation became made known, they'd pull the products from the shelf.
It's like a whole minefield. You probably have to study it for like months and months, and I don't think anybody actually knows really what's going on.
We don't really know where we stand, and I think from a retailer point of view, I still don't know categorically how long I'm going to be able to have stock on the shelf.
Yeah, there's definitely an element of confusion, and the more I've sort of researched it, the more confused I get. There's so many different bodies involved. There isn't one sort of place we can go to get advice.
Why don't we just cut to the chase here? It's like we're all confused. So let's be confused. And hey, it becomes a nice place to be in then, because actually we're all agreeing that we're confused. Yeah. So once we all agree we're confused, we can all sit down and start to work out what we can do about that confusion and what it's about. But the more we just pretend that it's you that's confused and not me that's confused, you know, hey, we're running around in circles, and that's confusing.
Herbal medicine is one of the most ancient forms of healing that is known, basically. These primitive societies, this group of people living in an area, and they just use the abundant herbs around them to heal. So they worked with instinct, but also they did work with empirical evidence from trying things out. They moved this knowledge around from generation to generation by word of mouth, so people got more and more knowledgeable about these herbs. And when they moved from one area to another, they discovered new herbs, they discovered new ways of using them, etc. At some point, they developed ways of moving this knowledge by writing. There isn't any set time when the art of writing first started, but the oldest books, texts that were found, were books or texts about plants, so it must have been very important to them. One of the oldest texts found was called the Pen of Tao, okay, and it's about 2000. It was written about 2800 BC.
Here's what we know. We know that the transitionary period ends on the 30th of April. We also know that the manufacturers have got 3 possible routes to go down. They can either apply for a full license, they can apply under the traditional herbal remedy scheme, or they can apply for food supplement status. So here's what we don't know. We don't know which manufacturers are going to apply for which licenses. We don't know which ones are going to go down the traditional herbal remedy status route, and we don't know which ones are going to apply for food supplement status.
It it really is, I think, the first word that we said, the confusion of it all, and the lack of definitive answers to fairly straightforward questions. And I think it's because a lot of the manufacturers don't know the answers either. Asking me to stop new lines, and when you say, well, what about the legislation? And they say, oh, what's that then? I mean, absolutely bizarre.
A number of suppliers are actively trying to get me to stockpile certain herbs.
If you put yourself into their situation, what would you do? They're trying to make a living, and they're probably more frightened than we are. As you say, we've got lots of alternatives we can offer, for instance, functional foods or food state supplements. Whereas if they make their money selling herbs that are standardised extracts in a capsule, where do they go from there if they're not planning to license?
Yeah. I hadn't really thought about it, from their perspective, but that's a good point.
It's very frightening, particularly for the consumers. They're getting a worse product after all of this sort of legislation, which is supposed to be better for the consumer and to protect them. They're actually getting a substandard product.
We can't actually go back to a manufacturer and say, oh, well, wait a minute, I don't actually like that magnesium stearate or E131 or whatever the excipient might be. Their hands are tied, because part of the agreement in the terms of their license to produce that product is to have those excipients in. That's how they got the license. So, I mean, what are we going to do now? We're going to accept that the only herbs that we can put on the shelf are now going to be filled with excipients. I mean, I am not going to put a product on my shelf that's got E131, which is a non-carcinogen. It's from coal tar. It's a dangerous substance. What place does that have in a traditional herbal remedy?
I won't be touching those. I'm going to have those on my shelves.
I'm not going to sell something that, I wouldn't take myself.
This is our industry. We should be proud of what we are doing, and we are supplying pure natural products, and we have to stick like that, no matter what, regardless of the license and who is making them.
I mean, I've never had to say to a customer in my store, the only thing that's available to you is the one with the chemicals and the excipients in. I don't do it with my bread, with my cereals, with my soups, and I'm jolly well not going to start doing it with the herbal remedies.
Come in daily, some regular customers, some new to us, who are looking for things to help them with certain health problems they've been presented with. Sometimes possibly they've been to a doctor and been given a diagnosis, offered medication, declined that offer and want to look for alternatives. And other times people are just aware something's not quite right and they want to redress the balance and put themselves back into equilibrium, and they come in and we help them to do that.
Britain is more an eclectic mix of all of these things, more of the Roman philosophy of medicine, but the Druidic philosophy of medicine as well, and the monasterial part of it as well, where it's all physical. It's a unique mix that is not available in mainstream Europe as such at the moment. In Great Britain there became a conflict between the allopathic medics and the traditional botanical medics, and in the reign of King Henry VIII he passed a doctrine, a charter for the rights of medical herbalists, or of herbalists in general. From that out came the use of digitalis and aspirin and things that are quite fundamental that we still use these days, because the herbs were then taken apart and they were finding out what exactly worked in those herbs, because they were interested in the actual herb to start off with. The medics were empowered to use the herbs, and the herbalists were empowered to continue their healing, and what came out of it was all positive. Often you'd find people at a very early stage of an ailment go and help themselves with herbs that they would find around, but they do not necessarily go to a medic unless things get really, really complicated. And it would be such a shame, it would be such a disempowerment for that to be taken away from people. I believe that people will just lose the ability to find their own health. They will more and more depend on others.
So what is it about? Why are they trying to ban herbs that people use to keep well?
It's about money. It's about money and control. They're the only two things that come into play.
It makes me wonder who's actually behind this type of stuff.
As we all know, a lot of this is driven by pharmaceutical companies, and when you look at the list of herbs that will probably be banned, you can pick out the medication that would be offered by a GP.
Look at all the contraindications of taking different medication. I used to work in pharmaceuticals. I've come from that area. Now I've come into the natural product world, and I think it's fantastic, but it's almost like we're going more and more towards a pharmaceutical line, which I think is so wrong. It's taken away our heritage in a lot of ways.
It's not about now, it's about generations to come, of people not knowing these things and having to learn them again at some point in time.
My dad got a prescription medication a couple of months ago, and the bottom side effect was may cause death. And I just looked at this and I thought, why would anybody put this in their body, you know, apart from the other 50 side effects?
If they've taken away the alternative, there is no alternative.
Disempowering people completely from their choices and saying, actually, you don't know what you should be taking. We will tell you, you will take this herb in this way, and you will not try it in any other way.
But I think that is the whole point of the legislation, that it's going to really limit people's choices, and that's the real scary part of it.
How are they going to know the traditional herbs that we've always used that we can't have because we don't have licenses for them or THRs for them, because nobody has that kind of money to put forward to make it available, you know, retail wise, or even make it worthwhile the manufacturers bring it in. So they're going to just go to different areas of the world. They're going to go on the internet to get it, and that is very, very unsafe. So it's like pushing people underground.
It's the people that want to look after themselves and try desperately hard to keep in good health or maintain bad health, and to a point where they're getting better, and it will be them that are affected.
It's like somebody coming in and trying to limit you to a certain space. You can't move around.
Whereas the herbalists are completely separate from the doctor, and the doctor is completely separate from the consultant, and the psychologist is completely separate. So all of that, if the knowledge was all together somehow or communicated, it would be much better for the person or the patient. Because at the end of the day, it's the person that's important, not the disease.
You're deciding every time you buy a herb, every time you get a pharmaceutical drug, every time you buy food, you're kind of deciding what world you would like created.
I wanted to make sure that the people coming in to me, into my store, to talk to me, to talk to my staff, were being looked after, they were being cared for, you know, and were being given the best that we could give them. You know, I wanted them to be able to know that they needn't worry about what we were offering, that we had done that for them, that we had taken care about what we were doing.
I just want to help people. I want to serve, you know, I want to serve them, I want to talk to them. I want to be a retailer. I don't want to be some sort of crusader.
It's an information point for people to come in, and then they go away and they look at stuff on the internet. We suggest that they read books. People educate themselves, get knowledge, and then decide what they're going to do.
You know, I don't do this to make millions of pounds. I do this because I really have a genuine interest in this, and I have a genuine interest in helping people. It's the most rewarding thing when someone comes and says, thank you, that really helped.
I think that then our next step is for independent retailers to work with each other rather than to fear them as competition, because we're not competition. We're here and we can learn from each other.
It comes down to the power of the retailer, doesn't it?
I think as long as we unite, there is power to us, certainly, but I think that's one of the things that we could do better as retailers, is all talk to one another and, you know, have better channels of communication with one another and just be in touch, basically. So I don't think we do it very well as an industry. We're great at getting together at trade shows.
We've all worked hard to build this industry of ours. It started almost as a movement. We drew a line in the sand. We are not destroying the environment. We are not exploiting others for gain. We are not putting poisons in our bodies. That's it. No compromise. We're battling the economy. We are fighting off the influence of other industries. It takes all of us to keep it alive. Consumers, retailers and manufacturers. It must be a group effort, a community effort. It takes all of us.